Hello, I'm David Kain. I'm president of Kain Automotive, and today I've got the pleasure of having Lissette Gole, the head of automotive retail with Google, join us today. And I'm really happy that she's taken the time to do this because there's so much going on with respect to Google's automotive strategy. And Lissette, if you would, please introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a little bit about how you got into the role that you're in and what you do at Google.
Thanks, David. Well, first, I'm thrilled to be here, so thank you for having me. I look forward to our discussion. And as you mentioned, I'm the head of automotive retail at Google. I've been at Google for nearly 9 years now, and prior to that in automotive for nearly 17. And so my background is across all OEMs, all tiers. And I really love the retail space in particular, and I'm just so thrilled and so honored to have been in this particular role for coming up on 2 years as well. So it's a pleasure to be here today. Prior to auto, I have dealer experience in the marine dealer space. So I have a history of F&I and a history of working in the service departments there, and then moving into the automotive space. Wow. So it's a welcome home to be in this position.
So you live in Detroit or the greater Detroit. I always talk to my friend Dan Weeblehouse with Suburban Collection, and he goes, everybody says they live in Detroit, but nobody actually lives in Detroit. We live around Detroit. So, and of course that's not fair to the Detroit citizens because there's tons of people who love Detroit and live right in the city. But tell us a little bit about what being from the Motor City is like and being in automotive retail.
Well, being from the Motor City is wonderful. I left for a few years and came back. Funny story, I live close to Dan's stores. So it is a small industry more holistically, which I love about Detroit. Automotive is extremely small and family oriented, no matter whether you're working in a dealership or whether you're working at a publisher like myself. And so I love that about the auto industry. And it's one of my passions about the auto industry is it is so innovative, and they do take heart and they take care of, this is a family business. This is a long-standing 100-year-old industry, and you can really feel that living in the Detroit metro area as well. So I think it just infuses everything we do.
I can just imagine. So as far as being head of automotive retail, I've been to your all's offices there in downtown Detroit. And obviously you're in the throes of the pandemic. You all have this fabulous workplace, and yet now all of a sudden you are working in kitchens and home offices and, dens and things of that nature. Early on in the pandemic, you as the leader of this group is responsible for productivity and making sure, because it's one thing for you all to be scattered, but you've got to put together this front to the dealers who are also challenged with some of the things that are going on. How did you balance both sides of that? And from what I understand from the dealers that we talked to, you all didn't miss a beat when it came to getting them geared up and ready for the pandemic.
Well, I hope, that means a lot to me. So I hope that everybody does feel that way, that we didn't miss a beat. We are truly here to help. That's what we are aiming to do on the automotive retail team and with Google and automotive more holistically. I do think we had a benefit in being a technology company at our core. So moving into video conference wasn't a huge learning curve for us, although, there are learning curves around bandwidth and things like that, which everybody, is dealing with at the moment. But I feel like that helped us make this transition, which we are very lucky to do. And in terms of, for the dealerships, we've just been we want to help, from day one. We just want to be helpful, and that's really what we've been striving to do. We've seen the dealers show up and move so quickly for their communities, for their businesses. They've pivoted their businesses in a way that I haven't seen done in the last decade in terms of speed, and innovation has just been rampant. It still is. So they have been our inspiration as well. So we're just hoping to really provide them with what they need to continue to do their jobs and transition and help their communities and help their businesses as best as possible.
I can just imagine. So what I got to experience firsthand were dealers that rarely do anything in the middle. They either shut down advertising or they put the pedal to the metal. Out of curiosity, was there a guiding principle that you guys did at Google that said, hey, don't give up, people are going to be in the market? Or was there kind of a general perspective that says, let's meter what dealers are doing and let's match where they want to go? What was the early strategy?
So the early strategy is, we're a very data-driven company. We believe data is the most powerful piece of your business, of anybody's business. And so we lean into that. And that helps us inform our strategies and how we can help by looking at what consumer demand is doing, what does consumer behavior look like, and not only within the United States, but also within particular regions, because what's happening this year is extremely regionalized, and what matters for one part of the country is completely different for another. So those are our first steps, and those have been our ways forward for a long time, and they continue to be. One of the things that we saw quickly was that customers and dealers were able to pivot quickly to fixed apps. So when their front-end showrooms were not, available to be open, and then as those opened, they started to move into, digital retailing. And we're also now seeing a focus not only on fixed apps, new and digital retailing in that space, but also used vehicles with everything that's happening with SAR and wholesale. And so we're just really striving to provide all the information that will help them maintain ahead of the curve. Because we do expect that this will continue to change. Every few weeks we get new information, and so we're just evolving in real time. And we know that they are too.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you think about that, dealers, I remember when I first went to Ford Direct, I used to say to them, well, I've spent 20 years in dealerships, so I want to go with my instincts and so on and so forth. And a gentleman who I won't mention his name, he'll probably appreciate if he sees this, but he says, look, yeah, you really do have a good instinct for automotive retail. However, what if we combine that with some really good data points? Wouldn't that make your decisions even better? And I was like, yeah, and I would imagine that you all probably, with the dealers that you work with on a regular basis, already had that trust established. But there probably had to be some to where your team members came back and they were thinking, well, it's hard to convince this guy to hold in and to spend into the market as opposed to pull back. And one of the lessons that I got from my father years ago was you got to wait till the market comes back. It's hard to buy a market. And there's probably a lot of truth to that. But at the same point, you all are on the leading edge to the eventual purchase. So the grooming period, the shopping period, have you noticed any changes occurring in consumer behavior there? Are they forestalling decisions? Are they spending more time in prep to purchase? What's it look like from the data front?
That's a great question. So I'll actually, before I answer directly, I'll frame it up into three trends that we've been seeing over the past few months. So we've actually seen that on this road to recovery, there's three areas of acceleration that we're noticing. So the first one we're calling shocks, which are sudden changes that are unlikely to sustain. So those were industry trends that we saw early on with a spike around consumers looking for deferred payments, for example. So that was a shock. It didn't necessarily sustain, but we saw a significant increase in that trend. And then we saw other trends that we called step changes. So these were sudden changes in behavior that we think could potentially sustain. So an example of a step change, David, is spikes in searches for vehicle financing. And at the same time in April, we saw similar declines in the terms that had leasing related to that, because APRs were driving interest in financing, and they were just shifting consumer demand a little bit. And then we've also, though, seen changes, which will directly answer your question around what we're calling speed up. So these are dramatic accelerations of existing behavior, but we expect them to sustain in the long run. So these were already behavior trends. Think about people using video, and YouTube to bring the shopping experience closer to home. But we're finding that those are going to survive and thrive and sustain. So to your question around car shoppers, so I'm actually going to cite a study that Cars.com did in March. And in March, they found that 20% of their respondents who did not own a car were considering purchasing one. And that's in March. So that's in the middle of all of this change right now. And so what I want to do is just take a moment and quantify what that number means, because we drilled down and we said, okay, well, how many people are in market and what does that actually mean for new car buyers that are coming into the dealership? So if we look at ages 25 to 54 specifically, there were over 17 million people that don't own a car.
Wow.
And 20% of those is over 3 million people. So that's 3 million people that are new to the car market that we weren't necessarily seeing before, because some of this behavior and these consideration factors are changing. And so if they're looking for their first vehicle, we're not only able to to talk to people who want to move into leasing and trade their car ins early or are interested in financing, but these are new buyers that dealers can start to tap into.
Wow, God, what interesting data array, because, you think about that very early on, that is what we saw, were those people who wanted to take advantage of the deferred payments and the 0% interest. And, we called it the need buyer, the want buyer, the I want a deal buyer, and the I'm just curious buyer. And it seems like it works really hand in glove with the data points that you're talking about. And what's interesting is the behavior of the dealers. I think, you all had to probably move into full-on consulting mode with some dealers and even OEMs who, at a time like this, as you mentioned, it's regionalized. So what's happening in Florida is considerably different than what was happening in New York or Missouri or California, or wherever. And so having 50 or more different strategies, and maybe even you look at a Miami versus an Orlando or Tallahassee, the regional differences within a state. So that's interesting from the perspective of you all having to leverage that data. Does ultimately come down to the dealer either trusting their relationship with their provider? I guess you all work through marketing companies that recommend different types of search array. How are those decisions made, and what did you find to be really the reason why dealers trusted the approach or the recommendation one way or the other?
So so to your point, they do work with their providers. They're either their in-house agency or marketing team, or their third-party agency team, and we work with all of those partners because we want to make sure that dealerships have access to the same information and the same best practices, regardless of whether they're using in-house or an agency. And so I do think that through those existing relationships, not only with Google and the agency, but just across the board with dealers and their agencies, et cetera, that also helps when you're looking to evaluate the next way forward. But again, since we try to anchor everything in so much data, we want to be transparent, and we want the dealers to understand where their money is going with Google and how it's truly helping their bottom line and their profitability. And so all of our conversations are really anchored in that. How can Google help you be profitable in your dealership? And that's not only just for new vehicles, but it's also for fixed ops and used as well. We want to make sure that we're having those conversations across the board, so that at the end of the day, what they're doing in terms of marketing with Google drives profit to the dealership, regardless of their relationship. And so, as you mentioned, there are, the industry is so vast, there are a lot of different relationships in there, but we want to help no matter how you're coming to Google.
Absolutely. So speaking of how you're coming to Google, you spent a lot of time updating the Google Playbook, and I'd love to give you the floor to just kind of share the rationale for the Playbook in the beginning. What are some of the highlights of the updates, and is it still relevant in today's market, or do we throw the Playbook out and say, just let me talk to you, help me out through this?
Yeah, so a great question. So as you know, we had Google Dealer Guidebook 1.0 in the market since 2017. And in early 2019, we debuted 2.0 at NADA in February. And the premise behind Dealer Guidebook 2.0 is that it's building off of everything you've learned and activated in 1.0. And so that's still the foundation. So we recommend, if you haven't fully embraced Guidebook 1.0, please do so before we move into 2.0. But really what we're talking about in Guidebook 2.0 is moving into automation, allowing automation and machine learning to make these real time decisions that are numerous in terms of magnitude on your behalf to find the right customer who's willing to, who is in market, ready to buy a car or ready to, leverage your service lane. So you're going to find them in real time through automation. And coupled with that, we've revealed a profitability calculator so that you as a dealer can really understand, as I mentioned earlier, what am I spending with Google and how is that driving impact to my dealership? Is it helping make me profitable? So you can actually have that in your hands as a dealer and compare all of your media to really understand where profits are being driven to your dealership. Where is store traffic coming in? Where are you getting phone calls and lead forms online from? So you really will have that all at your fingertips. And we're so proud of that and excited to bring that forward to the industry. It is so highly relevant. So it's just as relevant today as it was in February. And even though we'll talk about tactics that may change across all profit centers of the dealership, the measurement strategy, the automation, that is all remains the same. And so we want to make sure that we're leaning on the guidebook best practices to make sure that your dealership is profitable in their marketing.
Excellent. So that begs the question, how would a dealer get a hold of the guidebook?
Yes. So contact your Google representative. And if you're using an agency, your agency will know your Google representative if you're not quite sure. And then as a follow-up, of course, we can send this out to our viewers as well to make sure that they all have the guidebook and the profitability calculator in hand.
So you guys really are educators. I know you're business people and you pay real close attention to all the science. But to a large degree, what I've seen, and you've participated firsthand at our event, you've spoken at a couple of our 20 groups, you love to beat the drum on education and doing things right. And tell us a little bit about the culture of educating your clients in the Google world.
Sure. So we really believe that information, data, knowledge is power, and then that power will help you make the right decisions for your dealership. So we are a technology company, we're data-based, and we have a lot of really great insights and best practices to fuel that. But the reason we care about education is because the dealers are the experts in their business. And there is no one size fits all on what makes one dealership profitable versus another. There are fundamentals and there are best practices, of course, but application it varies. And so we really want that education so that you as a dealer principal and your marketing team can really understand how to activate in a way that's best for you. And so with Guidebook, for example, you don't have to know all of the ins and outs of Google marketing. You have agency teams that will help with that. You have a Google team that will help with that. But at the core of education, it's taking the best practices in a really simplified way and making them applicable to drive what's best for your business.
Yeah, I can imagine. So one of the things that's really been top of mind for our clients is Google My Business. And I know myself, it's been something that's really helped our little company. Tell us a little bit about the organics of Google My Business and what the current status is and what perhaps the future might look like.
Sure. So first, let's talk just for a step back on the key role of Google My Business for anybody who's not intimately familiar with it. And so what it is a free business listing management platform. And it gives you the ability to create an online presence for your business and your dealership and engage with your customer within search and within maps. Google My Business is essentially an organic listing, so it does not take the place of a paid ad listing, but it really allows you the maps and the search presence when somebody's looking for your dealership on maps, for instance. It really is a critical tool for helping your customers find you because 75% of auto purchasers are shopping online and they're searching. So if we talk about why Google My Business is important, let's talk about a couple of best practices. The first is focus on the basics. So the brilliant basics are always your friend, and ensure that your profile has accurate information like photos, links to your website, a really nice cover photo. And all of this was important before, but it is extremely important right now, especially as that's becoming your showroom storefront. Your Google My Business listing is where they're finding you first. And if they're not going into the showroom, it could be their only touch point. So make sure that those are updated. Those are really relevant. You're creating a link to your website. You're adding all the attributes. So you're talking about, do you have free Wi-Fi, in your service while you're waiting for your service lane? We can now, with COVID, we have an ability to have listings updated around COVID in particular. So you can actually share timely updates. So you can add information about reduced hours or if you're closed, safety or hygiene practices. So these are a lot of things we're talking about right now in the industry, and it's good to talk to your customers about those as well. Your department differences. If your showroom is closed, but your service lane is open and has Wi-Fi, those are great things to talk about. And so we can continue to update these right now. As we talked about at the top of the hour, things are changing regularly. And so Google My Business is the way that you can make sure that your customers have the most relevant information, your most relevant hours right now. The other thing I want to talk about too, in terms of COVID and how Google My Business can help right now, and it will continue to help in the long run, but promote any alternative services. So if you are offering vehicle delivery, if you are offering online retailing or service center pickup or drop off to somebody's home, you can talk about that in your Google My Business listings, and we want to ensure that you're doing that so that really they have all they need to know about your dealership at the forefront.
Oh, cool. So there is a small platform that you guys also have tucked into the Google world. It's called YouTube. We're huge proponents of YouTube, and we have some of the dealerships we work with have had even some of their individual product advisors and product specialists, salespeople become real good authorities in the Google world just by going out and doing video presentations. Maybe they'll feature something on the vehicle, or they'll do comparisons of products on the lot. So, notable, this fellow in Louisville called Chevy Dude, Mike Davenport, and Toyota Jeff, and there's all kinds of pockets of real notable salespeople who have utilized YouTube, and even dealerships. Are Tampa Harley Group out of Florida has over 40 million views on their YouTube channel, and it's amazing how few dealers actually utilize YouTube to its full extent. So, kind of as a finishing topic, could you tell a little bit about YouTube and its place perhaps in a dealer's portfolio of marketing?
Sure. So I'll talk about YouTube right now because we're seeing watch time accelerating, and we've actually seen a 27% year-over-year growth in automotive content watch time from March to June on YouTube. So when we talk about YouTube's place and role in the automotive space, it's been important. YouTube has been the #1 destination for auto content over the last 8 years. It's continuing to increase as we see in those numbers. So people are really getting their automotive content on YouTube, and that is one of the first places that they go. One of the trends that we talked about with Speed Up is these trends that are continuing to last a while. And there's actually two that relate to YouTube. The first is that people want the dealership experience closer to home. And so YouTube plays a strong role in that. So as you mentioned, there's a lot of content around, vehicle walkarounds and test drives. And those are all really important and will continue to stay important as customers want the look and the feel of the vehicle from the comfort of their home. And then the other thing is that people also want online buying and at-home delivery. Yeah. So, and YouTube plays a role in that as well, because you really can use that platform in order to talk about how you offer online buying, what the process is like, how does at-home delivery work, what are the safety measures you're taking. So all of that sight, sound, and motion coupled with the audience that's on YouTube looking for that type of content makes it a really important platform, and it plays a really strong role in the shopper's experience. And as I mentioned, we continue to expect that to stay. So, around dealership video best practices, test drives, walk-arounds, really important. It doesn't have to be like the highest production content though. What your customers want, especially when they're in market and at the dealership, is authenticity. So customers want to see that specific vehicle that they're looking for. So if I'm in market for the white Grand Cherokee Limited, I want to see that white Grand Cherokee Limited that you're going to sell me. I want to see what it looks like inside. I want to see, I really want to understand how the entertainment system works. And you can do that. You can do that with iPhone video. iPhone video is great these days. And so don't let the production capability limit you in creating this. Your sales teams can go to market, and they can, if they're doing a walk around of a vehicle, they can just film it, and you can put that up on YouTube, and you can use that as an advertising medium.
That's cool. And so my colleague loves this Google Pixel. So he says it does really good quality. And
it does.
We're having this tug of war back and forth because I love iPhone, but certainly, and it's sweet of you not to highlight that Google product, but it is interesting. I love the CEO of YouTube who said, people come to YouTube for texture, not polish. To your point about don't worry so much about the production quality, but let's do that authenticity. And it really seems to work. And if look at these YouTube famous people, their video quality is terrible. And some would say their content is terrible too. But when you are presenting a really great car and something that's important to someone who is in the consideration set, it's remarkable. And we find, and it'll be interesting as people study over time, if you're curious, go to Google Trends and type in search terms, put comparative search terms. Google gives all the tools that you'd ever care to have to become just ridiculously productive with respect to search and any kind of digital marketing. So as Google is known for search and obviously YouTube, they are great educators, and they provide a lot of tools and resources to the industry. And I, for one, am really grateful for my relationship with Google, and in particular you, Lissette. Is there anything that we've missed that you think might be pertinent to the discussion that dealers might could or should know?
Well, I want to just close on one other more point on YouTube, if you don't mind, because we did use the examples I was using was in the new car space, but it also plays a really strong role within your service center too. So if, we talked about in the context of Google My Business, some of these safety and feature highlights, all of that can be done on YouTube as well. So you can still have a walk around of what your service lane looks like and how you're taking care of your customer today and how you can bring that closer to home. So when you're thinking about YouTube, think about it for all of your profit centers like you would think of the rest of Google, because it's also very valuable, and there's a lot of demand and content there too.
No question. Well, Lissette, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you for spending the time and sharing from the world of Google. I trust you'll stay safe and healthy, and perhaps we can get you back on again as we near the end of this and talk about some of those other strategies. And if you could, one more time, walk us through the 3 categories that you guys are looking at, because I think those are really nice to leave on, ending with the speed up. So what were those again?
So the 3 that we're seeing over the past few months are the trends around shocks. So these are sudden changes that are unlikely to sustain. The next are step changes. So these are sudden changes in customer behavior that may sustain. And then we have 4 speed up trends. And speed up are these dramatic accelerations of existing behavior that we expect to sustain over time. And let me talk about those 4 trends just really quickly as we close out. So the first one is that people are finding comfort in car ownership. And so this is an example when we talked earlier around the number of people that didn't previously own a car that are now looking to buy a vehicle. The next is that people are expecting to find a deal. And we talked about this in the context of financing and leasing and APR, the really great offers that are out there today. People want the dealership experience closer to home. So we just touched on that with YouTube and how to gain access to that there to make sure that you are messaging to your customers on YouTube. And people want online buying and at-home delivery. And so make sure that you're talking about that within search, within Google My Business, and within your YouTube content as well.
Wow. So some really great takeaways from that, and I really do appreciate it. I do think we could probably talk for a couple of hours, and then even then people would be saying, but what about this? So there are great resources available. Is there a place to where you recommend that dealers go in and around? I know they work through their agencies and the like, but Google has a lot of good resources. Is there one place they should do, or should they just Google it? Is there any place that you recommend in particular?
So Think with Google is a great resource. We have recently released automotive trends, some of which we covered today that we're seeing and expect to continue over time. And then the Dealer Guidebook 2.0 is really going to be your one-stop shop for how do I execute with Google and take advantage of these best practices that you're seeing in your customers' behavior. So reach out to your agency, reach out to your Google team, and we can make sure you have Guidebook 2.0 and that profitability calculator. And I encourage everyone to use it and provide us feedback. I would love to hear how that's working for you.
Excellent. Lissette, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope you and your family stay safe and healthy, and I look forward to seeing you on the road somewhere in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.
You as well, David.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you for having me.